Welcome back to Amir Khan Project Management Academy. And in today's video, we'll understand the critical path and float. And in order to understand these two important concepts in project management, we will continue with our project, which we have created in Primavera P6. So this is our project, and we have defined the activities for our project, and we have developed the network diagram as we can see here, and we have defined the duration, the relationship. So everything has been done in the previous video, and we have created the project schedule. And as per the schedule, the total duration we are getting is 23 days. So the basic purpose of today's video is to understand the critical path, and we discussed in the previous video that in the network diagram, if there is any arrow which is in red color, so those activities are critical activities. So basically, that defines the critical path. So what is the critical path? So in order to understand, we'll have to analyze this network diagram. So I'll open the network diagram as an image, so it is the same network diagram. So to understand or to identify the critical path, so we need to know how many different paths there are in the network diagram. So the first path we have, so I'll draw the line. So the first path we have is starting from the user interviews, then going towards finalize scope, hire resources, DFD, coding, testing, user acceptance, and final approval. So this is one path. Okay, so first of all, I'll draw the lines for each and every path. Then the second path which we have is again starting from the user interviews, going towards the finalize scope, okay, and then coming down to the purchase license, then going up DFD coding, testing, user acceptance, and going towards the final approval. So that is the second path. Okay. Then the third path which we have, so it will start again from the user interviews, finalize scope, hire resources, and then going towards DFD coding. And after coding, instead of going straight, so we have one arrow coming down, so quality control inspection, and then going up user acceptance and final approval. So that is the third path. So the fourth path we have is user interviews, finalize scope, then coming down purchase license, DFD coding, and again coming down, and then user acceptance and final approval. Okay, so these are the four different paths we have. So again, let me show you. So the first path is user interviews, and we are following the arrows: finalize scope, high resources, DFD, coding, testing, user acceptance, and final approval. So that is the straight path we have. So one straight line. So that is the path number one. Okay. Then the path number two is starting from user interviews, going towards the finalized scope. And instead of going straight, we will come down, follow this arrow, purchase license, and then go up, follow the arrow, and going straight. So that is the second path. Third path is again user interviews, finalize, coming down to the purchase license, then up DFD and everything. And here from testing, from after coding, instead of going to the testing, you will come down to the quality control inspection. Okay, so that is the third path we have. So similarly, if you follow the arrow, so in this network diagram, we have total four paths. So once you have identified how many paths we have in the project network diagram, all we have to do is to write down the duration of each path. So I'll write down the duration for two of the paths. The rest of the two paths, you can do the calculation. So the first path is again user interviews, starting from user interviews and following the straight line going towards the end to the final approval. So if we add up their duration, so these are the durations for each of the activity. So if we add up all of these durations, so 5 plus 2 7 plus 1 8 plus 2 10, then this 14, 18, 19, and 20. So the first path giving us the total of 20 days. Okay. Then if we follow the second path, so 5 plus 2 7, and then we come down, 7 plus 4 11, then go up, so 11 plus 2, so 11 plus 2 13, then 17, 21, and 22 and 23. So second path we have is 23 days. Okay, let's add one more. So we have 5 plus 2 7, then come down here, 7 plus 4 11, then go up 13, 13 plus 4 17, 17, if we come down, 17 plus 2 we have 19, 20 and 21. So here we have 21. So we have calculated the duration for three paths. The last path you can do the calculation following the similar method. So what we have here, we have different paths, and for each path it has its own total duration. Now which one is the critical path? The critical path is the one which is having the longest duration. So out of these three or four different paths, you know the duration of each path. So this path here, 23, so we'll have to identify that which are the activities on this path. So the activities on this path will be the user interviews, finalize a scope, then this one, purchase license, and DFD coding, testing, user acceptance, because these are in red as well, so we can easily identify. So if we add up the duration of all of these activities which are on red, so you will see that this path will be having the longest duration of 23 days. So the critical path is the path which is longest in terms of duration. Okay, so it may have fewer activities compared to the other path, but all we have to do is to focus on the total duration. So any path which is having the longest duration, that will be the critical path. And whatever is the duration of the critical path, that is going to be the duration of this project. So this project, if we, so basically, if let's say if we go back to the P6, so here we have P6 and we have each and every activity separately. Now if we add up these durations separately, like 2 plus 5 plus 2 and so on, we will get the total duration of 26. But that is not going to be the duration of our project. The duration of our project is going to be 23, as we can see at the top. Why? Because the duration of the critical path is 23 days. So that's why we have the total duration of the project as 23 days. So that is how you will identify the critical path. After the critical path, there is one another important terminology which is called the float. Okay, now float is the amount an activity can be delayed without affecting the project deadline. For example, let's say if there is an activity which is having a float of 2 days. So this simply means that you can delay that activity up to 2 days. Still, you will be able to finish your project within 23 days. Your project end date or the total duration will not be affected. So float is the amount of time an activity can be delayed. All right. Now the float can only be calculated once you have calculated the critical path. So in P6, once we have calculated the critical path, we can easily identify the float. So all we have to do is to add up the column of total float. So as we can see here, that any activity which is on critical path will always have a float of 0, which means you cannot delay those activities even for a single day. That's why they are called the critical activities, because they are on critical path. So for example, user acceptance test. So if we look at the network diagram, so as we can see here, that the user acceptance test is on the critical path, as we already have calculated, and this is having the 0 float. Now what we can do, we can also add up this information inside this box as well. So we can right click, go to activity network options, and we can click here on box template, click on add to add one more field, and we can go for total float. All right, and click OK and OK. So we have the duration, and then in the very last cell we have the float. So we can now see that any activity which is on the critical path is having 0 float. So hiring the resources is not on the critical activity, or on the critical path. And similarly, QC inspection is not on the critical path. So that's why they have a float of some number of days. So in our case, for example, we have a float on hiring the resources, and we have a float of 3 days, which means that you can delay this activity up to 3 days. Still you will be able to finish your project within 23 days, whereas QC inspection you can delay this activity for up to 2 days. Still you will be able to finish your project on time. So that is the meaning of the float. So again, float is the amount of time an activity can be delayed without affecting the project deadline. So it's a very important information to know for the project managers. If you know that you have float on certain activities, you can play around, or you can shift the resources from one activity to the other one, because you have some margin of delay. So that's another important concept, float, that every project manager needs to know. Then another important concept we have while we are going to finalize the project schedule, we have another term which is called crashing. Okay, now we have calculated the critical path, which means the total duration we are going to get is 23 days. But what if the management doesn't agree on that? The management says, no, we want the project to finish on in 22 days, okay, or in 18 days, whatever. So in that case, how you can reduce the duration of the project, so or reduce the total duration of the project? So what we can do, you can crash your project. So crash basically means you will add more resources. Okay, you will add more resources. So if you will add more resources, the duration will be reduced. But the basic idea is that you will be adding more resources on critical activities, because the idea is to shorten the duration of the critical path. So crashing means adding more resources, and that will help you to reduce the duration of the project. Another term that can be used if you want to reduce the duration of the project, that is called the fast track. Fast track, you can do the fast tracking as well. So fast tracking means you will rearrange these activities, you will rearrange the network diagram, so the activities which are supposed to be performed one after the other, but in order to reduce the duration of the project, you will be doing them in parallel. Now this may increase the risk, but will help you to reduce the duration. For example, let's say that logically the coding should be done after the data flow diagrams. So once the diagrams are ready, once we know the overall structure of the project, then we start the coding. So that is what has been done. So the relationship we have is finish to start. So you finish the DFD and then you start the coding, but only to save the time. What you do, you change the orientation, you change the layout of or the relationships. So instead of finish to start, you will say, no, we will be following the relationship of start to start, which means as you have started creating the DFD, you have also started the coding. So after hiring the resources, you will start DFD and you will start coding as well. So now the coding will come here, okay, in parallel with the DFD. So you can save a certain amount of time if you do these two activities in parallel. But fast tracking may increase the risks, or may increase the like you may have to redo the work again. Okay, so like you are doing the DFD and the coding at the same time, but if you have changed something in the DFD, then you have to redo the coding. Okay, so these issues may happen, but we have these two options to reduce the duration of the project. We have the fast track and we have the crashing. And again, whatever change you will make in your plan durations or in the critical path, you will have to check the float again. Float needs to be checked during the execution as well, that we will see once we will start the execution of our project. And you will have to keep an eye on the critical path. So any change in the duration while you are still in the planning phase, the critical path may change. Okay, so that is the critical path. Another term which is linked to the critical path we have is near critical. Another term which is linked with to the critical path is called the near critical path. So the near critical path is the second longest. So in our case, uh, I don't know what's the duration of the fourth path, but let's assume that these are the three paths we have. So the second longest we have is 21 in this case. So whatever is the second longest path, that will be called as the near critical path. Now if the duration between the critical and the near critical path is very less, so as a project manager you need to be more concerned, because at any time with a very minor change, the path may shift. So the near critical path may become the main critical path, and vice versa. So you have to be careful, because as a project manager, your main focus will be on those activities which are on critical path. You need to make sure that any activity which is on critical path should not be delayed, otherwise your whole project will be affected as far as the project schedule is concerned. Okay, so these were some of the main concepts that needed some explanation: the critical path, near critical path, float, and crashing and fast tracking, and how to calculate the critical path. So you don't need to do it manually, the P6 will do all of this thing for you, but you need to understand what are these concepts as the project manager. So thank you for watching this video, and in the next video we will continue into our in the planning phase of the project. So let's go back to P6. So we will finalize this project schedule, we will be adding the resources, and we will create the schedule baseline, and after that we'll be working on the budgeting part. So I will see you in the next video.